Hello dear people! So we've had some updates in the Linux scene and perhaps some kind of Windows developments. Let's go over them briefly. What can go wrong? Well, I guess let's start with major releases in the Linux scene. Tuesday, 17th of February, release of the KDE Plasma Desktop 6.6. New features can be seen upon launch, as there is now Plasma setup, as in first time account setup, also including language and keyboard, time zone and theming. There is also a new Plasma login manager, apparently to integrate better with the desktop. It is dependent on a systemd, but the anti-systemd systems can still use the current SDDM login no problem. Plasma itself is not dropping BSD support. Concerning appearance, what you have set in the system settings can now be saved as a new global theme. Don't think it would save the quantum configuration though. The default wallpaper is this 3D shape forest. The intensity of frame borders can now be changed. In Spectacle, the screenshotting tool, there is an option to extract text from screenshots so you could easily copy it over. Seems to pretty much work, the text is in there. There is a new window option for them to be filtered out of screencasts. An aim of this update was to clean and speed up common workflows. You can log into a Wi-Fi network by showing its QR code through the webcam. There are a number of actions scrolling on an application in the panel good too, now including changing its volume. You can filter emojis in the selector by skin color and race, which, okay. Of course, it doesn't affect the generic smileys up top. KDE Plasma so far has had releases every 4 months, so we should get Plasma a funny number to some people in June and 6.9 next February, but I don't think anything can beat Linux kernel version 6.9420. Oh. However, after a few more patches and fixes, are we getting Plasma 6.66? 1 month and 1 day after Plasma 6.6, another major desktop got a new release, GNOME 50. Nice round number right there. This one is called Tokyo. Unlike the previous times when the significant digit in the version number changed, that being GNOME 3 and GNOME 40, I don't see a major overhaul in the layout and visuals. But with the versioning scheme they've adopted, it's only natural that after 49 comes 50. So surely there are new features. Variable refresh rate, VRR and fractional scaling are out of experimental state. Distros previously could choose to include them, but now they are supposed to be in there. Graphical improvements were also made to NVIDIA drivers and screen sharing with HDR. However, there is an issue with fractional scaling on GNOME, where windows running on the old X11 display can end up considerably smaller. Here I have set the Super Tux window to match the display size, but it only takes up a part of it. On Ubuntu, there was an option to basically force scale older apps, pretty much improving the sizing while sacrificing a little bit of that sharpness. I didn't see this option on Fedora, so what's up with that? All this scaling and HDR options and more are baked into KDE, alright. What's shared with KDE is that fractional scaling can cause this 1 pixel glitched artifact lines, which, okay. Since I'm already bringing out display quirks, window capture on Wayland takes the window borders and possibly the shadows with it. Not very immersive when I want to record a game or something. Also happens to an extent on KDE. Why is that the intended way? And oh yeah, going back to an X11 session is not an option, because it is removed from GNOME 50, with KDE expected to follow in version 6.8. I use Wayland by now, maybe you use Wayland, but anyone dependent on legacy X11 features will have some trouble with modern desktops. GNOME Document Viewer is significantly improved, now letting you add text boxes, lines and highlights as annotations. File swap has been optimized to be faster and more efficient, and there is a bulk renaming feature, which apparently was there before but now was reworked. Parental controls are greatly improved with screen time monitoring and limiting. You may keep that in mind. In the settings, you can set the first day of the week. Apparently, a part of this world uses 12-hour time and has Sunday as the start of the week. Volume levels can be configured per app, and input and output levels are clearly distinguished. New apps in the GNOME ecosystem, image annotations, new Sudoku game, I think they already had one, video compressor, and a timer app with sessions and breaks. And a new set of wallpapers, very nice. So you see, the updates to GNOME and KDE don't change visually that much, but there are a number of new features and quality of life improvements here and there, and I've only managed to cover the more striking of the changes. It is a step forward. Linux kernel 7.0 was released on the 12th of April. While it seems like a major update based on the number, it isn't all that different from a regular update. It's just that previous version being 6.19, the minor version, the secondary number, seem to get a little large. The changes in the kernel are more technical, but for example, another experimental tag has been turned to stable, this time for kernel modules written in Rust. There are improvements to swap memory usage, RISC-V processor extensions, and BetterFS file system with the new NullFS file system added. As I started writing the video, the new long-term support edition of Ubuntu 26.04 had just been released on the 23rd of April. Long-term support or LTS editions are supported for 5 years with 5 additional years available through Ubuntu Pro. A new LTS is significant for the use in servers and professional environments, but also matters to the home user because many of the popular user-friendly distros are based on it and can now transition to a newer base with newer software. Linux Mint probably comes out during the summer when the Ubuntu LTS gets its first point release bug fix update. Expect a new Zorin release in about a year and a half. That's about the most out-of-date still maintained distro I've seen. Pop! OS should publish a new release sometime soon. Ubuntu 26.04 comes with GNOME 50, KDE Plasma 6.6 and Kernel 7.0. Ubuntu LTS users finally have Plasma 6, yay! It took them about 2 years and 2 months. Looking past the flashiness of having kernel 7 in it, I find it odd how a brand new edition of the Linux kernel itself was swiftly put in the LTS release, one that's supposed to be super stable, while the fast-moving distros like Fedora are still working on it. Ubuntu has an interesting naming scheme where I pick an animal and a word starting with the same letter. The first letters go in alphabetical order per release, so it's time for the R word. Resolute Raccoon. Sure enough, there is a mascot design there and wallpapers were made around that theme. I noticed they changed the theme shortly before release. The folder icons are more colorful and the rounding of elements is more consistent. There is an interesting boot up animation based on the default wallpaper. They changed that. I used to be fond of the Ubuntu's theme with the orange and white scheme application panel, but when I look at the design of default GNOME, it feels more pleasant and polished. This release brings Ubuntu a little closer. One of the new things in this LTS is a Rust rewrite of some utilities, like sudo, used for root permissions. Rust has some advantages like better safety and memory management. The strict nature of the language helps catch errors. Sudo RS got into a bit of controversy for breaking traditions. One thing is just rewriting core system software for the sake of it, but now the amount of characters typed in is visible with these asterisks by default, which wasn't the case for how long? 45 years? This could still be turned on previously. I think Linux Mint did that. I do have some things against vanilla Ubuntu, like some graphical quirks and the aggressive push for snaps. Snaps might be good on servers for the auto updates, but the main addition of Ubuntu is for desktops, where the snap packages bring some of their quirks along. Snaps on desktop were known for poorer performance, worse integration with the system, and a number of file management quirks. The Snap store is also under canonical management and is kind of closed off, conflicting with the FOSS mindset. For desktops, there is a superior and more widely adopted universal packaging format, Flatpak. Graphical software management on Ubuntu is Snap based, with the default program being App Center, basically the Snap store, listing just Snap packages. Would a new user know any better to go get some Flatpaks or Debs? In fact, Canonical, the company behind Ubuntu, have outright banned Flatpak being pre-installed on official Ubuntu flavors. Some applications like Firefox, Thunderbird and Chromium come as Snap packages, even with apt install. All of this was the case in the previous LTS as well, and you know Canonical isn't backing down. Wait, you can search up Debian packages in the App Center? That is news to me. Ubuntu, as one of the most popular and most commercialized distros that also does things its own way, may come with some of what you might call bloat. The ISO for the installation is over 6 GB in size, which is more than what Windows 10 and 11 files used to be. Until the Windows 11 ISO from half a year ago came along and... what are these numbers? Am I getting the right thing? The typical Linux ISO is about 2 to 4 GB. The system requirements that Canonical has specified are also higher than those of Windows 11, like 6 GB of memory against 4 and double the processor speed. While these may be high for Linux standards, from what I'm hearing, and I maybe have a bit of experience with that, Windows 11 on its minimum requirements is basically unusable. Ubuntu at least works in that range. Ubuntu has its official flavors which now have 26.04 releases too. The most widely used of them is arguably Kubuntu, using the KDE Plasma desktop environment. If only they knew what version they are talking about. As mentioned, it is now in Plasma 6.6. It comes with Kubuntu Manage software, which lets you choose between Discover and Synaptic, used to find specific packages. Kubuntu changes some default sizing and enables a couple effects. I think Discover from KDE is a superior software manager for Ubuntu systems, because it supports system packages, Flatpaks and snaps out of the box. You can go to the sources and enable Flatpak with FlatHub with a click. To do that on the GNOME software, you have to install extensions you just have to know about through command line. Adopting the base Ubuntu changes and Plasma 6.6, Kubuntu also switches over to Wayland. X11 session is available to be installed, but it's not there by default. I'd suggest Kubuntu over default Ubuntu, it's just more approachable to new users. On the live ISO that's used for the installing, I did run into a few errors and, for example, OBS didn't detect any display capture. On basically any live ISO I tried for the video, there was no sound from the speakers. I hope the experience is better once the system is installed and updated, but with Ubuntu, am I really that surprised? Since the Cosmic desktop is now ready, I wonder how often will System 76 make a new Pop! OS release going forward. Will they do it for each Ubuntu release every half a year? The problem is that the Cosmic desktop is brand new, it still has to mature. There are numerous bugs to fix and gaps to fill in functionality. Such software in beta state was shipped with a stable release, Pop! OS 24.04 LTS. I'm happy that the desktop was released and I'd like to see it grow, but I can't see it giving the wrong impression like that and creating plenty of negativity around Pop! OS. Linus Tech Tips did a 1 month switch to Linux again, the first part of which is up on YouTube. Linus went with Pop! OS and ran into graphical issues. Other team members went with the popular distros and had a rather smooth experience once the system was installed. Later parts of the series are in the works, but Linus has talked about the experience and switching distros. At this point, it feels like he breaks any distro he touches. It really is a chance for desktop Linux to be in the spotlight and potentially show some of that new user experience to the community. Fedora 44 was initially planned to release on I think the 14th of April, but was delayed twice to the 28th, next Tuesday. Stuff still needed fixing. Now it is confirmed that it will be released on that date. I currently daily drive Fedora KDE myself. Here is a new wallpaper, looked like a circuit board at first, but I wonder if that's a real place. Fedora 44 comes with GNOME 50 and Kernel 6.19, so that will be updated to version 7 in a later update. Unlike GNOME, KDE Plasma new releases can be applied to Fedora in the middle of the release cycle, so we already have Plasma 6.6 in Fedora 43, but 44 will integrate the new account setup and login screen. Sure, GNOME 50 will remove X11 completely, but Fedora was among the first to go all in on Wayland anyway. I think the new installer was there for all spins previously. There is an option for disk encryption. Since Fedora brings new software with really few changes from their part, I don't know what else there is to bring out on the topic of new stuff. It seems like every Windows 11 update this year breaks the system. Whether Outlook isn't looking out, Notepad won't take some notes, or you can't see the C drive, aye? Another problem is Copilot AI shoved into the system. Like, you go about your thing in Paint or Notepad and see some AI-powered features really brought out. Then it's like, no, you need a subscription for that. Allegedly, they are pushing Copilot so hard they push it to write Windows update source code, and Copilot really do be copiloting. There are talks about Microsoft taking steps to improve the user experience, such as finally allowing users to customize the taskbar and cleaning up the search and widgets. It is clear though that the users are not happy with the state of the OS until they see real change in action. Switch to Linux like the government in La France and Germany are switching this infrastructure to Linux. Liberate yourself from the control of le monopoly américain et embrace open software. Still on political topics, some states are putting out laws for age verification. Oh my god. It got traction in February with the Colorado Age Attestation Bill SB 26051. The idea is that the OS stores an age bracket with the range in which the age of the user is in. It's then up to the applications to handle the age bracket and determine what to show to the user. In quick succession, similar laws were pushed, most notably in California with Act AB 1043, effective January 1st next year, and Brazil, effective since March 17th. About a week ago, a new federal bill in the US was brought out with the title of Parents Decide Act, requiring the user to provide their date of birth to set up and use their device. When passed, it could overwrite the single state regulations and mandate age verification on any devices in the definitely very free and open US of A. There don't seem to be OS level age verification obligations here in the EU, but there are discussions about regulating online platforms. An EU mobile app was launched for users to prove they are old enough online. It got immediately cracked. The large part of this laws coming into effect is Meta lobbyists actively pushing for it, trying to get the responsibility of checking users off of their company and onto the OS providers. The laws here have quite broad definitions of operating system providers and app stores, likely taking Linux with its different ways to get software with them. Some people feel like the laws are meant for the big corporations to keep them more under control, and open source software unfortunately happen to get caught in the crossfire. Others assure that it's for government control and to crush the competition by heavily regulating it. Note that Linux as a platform is decentralized and largely built on hobbies and volunteer work. How are they supposed to respond? Developers for Linux software are now left to discuss and find a way to move forwards in light of these new laws. A big step in whatever direction it is was when the date of birth field was added to systemd, the init system meant to start up a Linux system but has grown to handle all of your drivers, account and more. While this was just an optional field, do whatever you want with it, it obviously caused a lot of outrage while signaling swift compliance with more questionable builds brought out. Something you'll come to learn about the Linux community is that a significant part of the users are there to get away from big corporate control, and they are more sensitive about their privacy, so any identity checks won't be taken lightly. There is a repo listing the stances of different projects on each verification and the actions they intend to take. Interestingly, the firmware programmer for the scientific calculator had to speak out. That's how wide-reaching this whole deal is. But the same guy also made a list about projects with woke views, and the response to that is quite something. I have probably given him too much attention and validation on this channel just by mentioning what he's up to. We're moving on. Let's see the two sides of the argument. It is to keep children away from harmful content. Who wouldn't want that? Wouldn't that be up to the parents to do? GNOME has parental controls built in. They put a lot of focus on that. Would you like governments and businesses to come snooping around your personal device, identifying you? What do you mean, parents decide act? It's Mr. Minister deciding for all of you. It's just an optional field. Users aren't required to set or validate it. Distros and users can choose whether they want to do anything with it, and they aren't required to verify that to anyone. That's how it is right now. The laws feel like they are a step towards something bigger. Next, you have to have a valid age stored. Then maybe you have to actually verify that you are over a certain threshold. And soon after, you'll have to reveal more about yourself. Well, sucks to be from Colorado. It spread from Colorado to California and New York, to Brazil, and now to the entirety of the United States. Where to next? The law is a law. Breaking the Californian bill may result in thousands of dollars in fines per case. What are you gonna do about it? There is plenty of uncertainty about the implications to open source systems. The corporate-backed distros like Ubuntu from Canonical, Fedora with its relations to Red Hat, and Pop! OS from System76 are more susceptible to the laws and fines, so it's more likely to find checks there when time comes. It doesn't really help that System76 is literally based in Colorado, one of the places that the most strongly affected. Their founder went to speak with local senators to exclude open source projects from the bill and to show that the people have a voice in the matter. He just went to testify in front of the lawmakers, asking people for stories about what kids have achieved with open source software for that. Community forks of major distros like Devuan and Artix that undo the controversial upstream decisions are naturally more strongly against such checks, so just if you'd like to check out those. A project named Ageless Linux was launched in protest against age verification. The web page includes a script to neutralize any age-related stuff, along with documenting the laws and the response. We'll just have to wait and see what comes of this whole issue. So basically, age verification bad, what more needs to be said? Okay, some big news from the Apple side just in too. Tim Cook is cooking for the last time, having announced his retirement as the CEO of Apple after nearly 15 years of leading. He took it over from Steve Jobs and was tasked with guiding the movement started by the launch of iPhones and MacBooks, consistently building the company into one worth $4 trillion. New products during his time include AirPods and the Apple Watch, while the existing line of products was perhaps polished and simplified. Apple also experimented with some products which weren't a huge success, mainly the Vision Pro AR glasses. Recent years also oversaw the transition to the M-series Apple Silicon chips and of course the AI integration. Starting September 1st, John Termes, head of the hardware manufacturing department, will start as a new CEO. It's interesting how they bring people from the technical fields to lead the company. On the other end, there's GNOME that once had a shaman as the executive director. So these were some of the changes we had in the computer OS scene since the start of the year. There are updates to major desktops and distros, and age verification laws are creating a lot of uncertainty and outrage, and we'll see where all of this goes. So I'll end here. Thanks for watching. I am Meetian Lane. If you enjoyed, you can perhaps drop a like and subscribe, and see ya!